And as the next thing, I want to be working on the pistol stock, which is made entirely out of plastic. I will create a cylinder here, give it 18 sides, make sure it doesn't have a rotation on the z-axis, and then I will position it so that it fits the angle of our reference image. And now I'm just gonna make sure it's centered, so put it to 0 at the x-axis and make it a bit more adjusted to our receiver here, a bit smaller. And now I'm going to collapse it to an editable poly, and I will just apply a gray material on it so that it looks better. Now I'm just gonna grab these faces here, 7 of them, and drag it out here while being in the local mode. And still being in the local mode, I'm giving it that squeeze here, similar to what we were doing on the stock, if you remember. Again, a bit of squeezing here, so that the front part of the grip where the fingers would be is actually bit more of a curve there, of a steeper curve. Same here in the back. And that way we can just adjust the main shape here already. Let me just take these edges here in the inside, in the center, and add an extra edge loop to it so that we can then work with our symmetry modifier. I'm gonna delete the right side, and I will then continue by making an edge loop through everything here, give it in reset X form so that now we can take that edge loop here and, while being in the edge constraint, horizontally align it here. And next I'll take these edges here, make sure we are not in the edge constraint mode, and drag some fresh geometry out here. And let me pull these verts over here to the right side, and these we can already adjust a bit here to the left. Just dragging some more geometry out. And the same also here for the top part. And now I'm going to take these verts here and also push them to the right side more. And I want to add another edge loop here for these. And I'm going to have another look here at the reference image, at that curvy part here at the bottom. And I will just continue by taking these verts and push them out a bit. Take them all and give them a squeeze here on the y-axis. Gonna push these edges back a bit. And I'm gonna straighten these faces here. I was just aligning them so that they are actually all on the same coordinates. And now I'm just gonna take these two verts and connect them and get rid of this vert that we have in the middle. And let's make selections here for these edge loops that we don't need. I'm just gonna get rid of them. It's better to keep it low poly in the beginning while we are still working on our shape here. Just gonna push that up a bit. And now I'm going to take these faces and I want to bevel them out. So I will go over here to the local normal mode in the extrusion and bring them to the right size so that it aligns with our receiver here. I'm gonna take these edges and actually let me make sure I delete the faces that we don't need here. The extrusion just brought out some faces that we will never see. And now I'm just gonna go over here to the symmetry, go back to that edge loop and drag it down a bit. And it seems like it's going up a little bit here on the left side. So let me just drag these verts out here and we already pretty much have that. Make sure the edge flow is nice. And also I want to take that up a bit. It looks almost a bit like a triangular shape at the back. So let's just do it with the FDD modifier. And these I actually want to push all the way out here so that it perfectly aligns here on the front or on the right side. And also bring it up a bit. Right now I'm in the edge constraint mode. And let's give it a chamfer here, make it a bit rounder. And again, I'm out of the edge constraint mode, so let's just position these verts. I think the edge constraint shortcut is definitely one of my most used shortcuts. Or I should call it the toggle. Toggling between edge constraint and no edge constraint. Very frequent action. Let me add a flow connect here. And let's connect these verts. And let me just auto smooth everything here. And now I'm gonna take these faces and give it one smoothing group. And let's make sure that everything here is perfectly aligned to 0 on the x-axis. And for that you can either click the buttons on the right side or use a shortcut, as we've seen it in the introduction video. And let's continue here. Still a little bit of work left here on that shape. Some more repositioning. Gonna grab these verts here individually and pull them to where I want them to be. Give it a bit of a curve here, that edge flow. And that looks a bit too low poly here. So what I will do is, first of all, push these edges out. And then I'm gonna use a chamfer on it in just a moment. And connect these verts. And now it looks nicer there. And somehow the smoothing groups got overwritten again, so we'll just reapply smoothing groups here to that object. or these faces, and make it a bit more curved here. And that's already tested with our chamfer modifier. So let's put the minimum angle off, and I'm gonna put it here to unsmooth edges. And let's see what it looks like. Pretty good. Let me already rotate it here because our top part was not really aligned here properly to the receiver, which also has that angle. So now we're actually looking at the stock as it's seen on the reference image. And I'm just gonna bring it down here, reposition it a bit more. Go over to edge mode and also make it a bit of a nicer edge flow here in general. Have some more space there in between those vertices. And I'm gonna add another edge loop, bring it all the way down while being in the edge constraint mode, and have it somewhere around here. Gonna collapse the symmetry modifier, collapse 2, so that we can still maintain the chamfer and the turbo smooth on top. And now here with that face selected, I bring everything up a bit. Somewhere here. And let's bring that a little closer down here. And what I want to do is give that here an extrusion. These faces. Gonna put the extrude amount to 0, and now while being in the local mode still, I'm just gonna drag this geometry out here. And I'm gonna chamfer that here. Go over to the weld mode and make sure that everything is welded together. And now I'm just gonna fix this edge flow here that we got. Remove some edges and target weld it. And now we can connect that vert with that one over here. And I'm also gonna clean up here the bottom part of the stock, or the pistol grip. So now we're only left with these faces, and I'm gonna inset them. And still being in the local mode, I'm gonna drag these faces out. Do the same thing again over here. And now we have this shape done pretty nicely. Gonna collapse a few edges here, so that we don't have such a high poly count there. And let me just jump in the front perspective again and just delete the right side, so that again we don't have to do that work multiple times. Just reapply smoothing groups again and put the symmetry back on. Let me just refine this triangulation here a bit. Remove that edge, and now it looks pretty nice. Give it a bit of a squeeze here on the x-axis, so that it fits better with our receiver. And let's also already add this element here on the grip, which we won't have in our actual low poly mesh that we would then later use for any in-game use or marmoset, but we will actually already add it as a floater. that will just bake onto our high poly geometry. We will be talking more in depth about the floaters later once we get to the high poly, but let's already add some here. Gonna adjust these verts so that it fits. It should be pretty straightforward. Go over to edge mode and bring it in here. And I want to bring these up to here. And this one I'm gonna also position. And now we'll just switch over to face mode and work here with our inset. Bring that in. Take these edges, make a ring selection, add an extra edge loop, and let me make sure I'm not in edge mode, edge constraint. Gonna push that out here. And also apply gray material so that we see better what's going on. Gonna chamfer that edge loop. And now we have this shape here pretty much done already for our high poly floater. Let's see what it looks like here with our chamfer on it. Unsmooth edges and bring the amount down. And that looks pretty alright. And position it a bit closer here to the grip, so that later our normal map will bake just fine. And now that I look at it, it looks a bit too low poly here at the bottom part. So I will do some more refinement, add an extra edge loop and pop that out here. And for that upper edge here, I'm gonna just chamfer it. And just take these verts, reconnect them. And now we're pretty much done here with our stock or pistol grip. I guess I keep getting confused about these names. And one last time here, the smoothing group for the top part. And now we're left with a really nice pistol grip. Let me just add another screw to the bottom part of that grip, which I also see on the reference image. Give it the right amount of rotation and make sure it's right there in the center on the x-axis. And I'm just gonna grab these edges, make a ring selection, go over to local mode, and drag it out a bit so that it has more depth later in our normal map. Apply smoothing groups, and in combination with chamfer and turbo smooth looks great. And now I want to be working on our trigger guard elements here. Gonna just start with a plane and continue by making that plane look exactly like that trigger guard element. Go into isolation mode together with our reference image. Put it in the right position and then just give it a proper chamfer here. And the chamfer on the left is a bit wider than the one on the right side. So we'll do that individually here. And let's be generous. We want that to be really nice and round. This one here is fine because it's not such a huge curve as the one on the left. And now I just chamfer, or actually give it an inset, delete the inner segment as well as the top one, have the top verts aligned horizontally, and now we're left with that shape that we can then push out, go back into our edge mode and just drag some geo out here and make sure that it's perfectly aligned to our 0 coordinates on the x-axis. And then I will already continue here, make an edge connection here in the middle, align it horizontally, bring it down. And while being in face mode, I'm just gonna grab that face here and extrude it out. And that came out a bit too far, so I'm just gonna drag it back in and also make it a gray material here, that object. Gonna add another edge loop and just take that face that we have here. First, let's position it better here. Switch over to that face and extrude some more geometry out. And you can already see what we're up to here. I want to be working on that release element. Gonna work with our chamfer here. Make sure it's nice and curved. And let's give it 6 edges so that it's really not too low poly looking. Let's work on the top part here. And it also does this curvy thing there. Let me add an edge loop, go over to edge mode and align it vertically. And now I'm just going to take that face again and do the same action that we were already doing. Take that face and again extrude it out. Go over here to the top perspective, or actually the bottom perspective, and make sure it's aligned with our receiver. And let me get rid of these edge loops that we don't want to have here. Actually, let me undo that and deselect that edge. And now I'm just going to connect these two verts here. And give that edge loop here a chamfer. But we don't want to have that many chamfer edges in there, so I'm just going to leave it with 2. And do the same thing over here. Get rid of these edges and connect them in that corner there. And then also give it a chamfer here. And let's have a look around. It actually doesn't come that far out there, that element. So I will just select these verts and drag it in here on the x-axis. And also, I'm just going to get rid of that edge loop here in the middle and bring these verts a little closer by each other. And now I'm just going to use the flow connect and let 3D Max determine what is the right curve here for that. So now it looks a little nicer there, the edge flow. Let's put the symmetry modifier on. And that looks already pretty advanced here on our trigger guard. Just a bit more work left here on making sure that this geometry is nice. Gonna extrude some more faces out here on that top face. And now I'll just select these edges here, make an edge loop or an edge connection, and work on that element that we see here on the reference. So let's just drag these edges over here, and now I'm just gonna extrude it out again and use the same workflow that we just used to get these other curves. Add another edge loop here, drag it out a bit more here. And again, I will just get rid of these edges here. Connect those two verts, and also on that side. And now I'm just going to chamfer it here as well. Actually gonna give it 3 edges here. And now I will take these 2 edges and also chamfer it. I'm gonna chamfer it all the way so that these edges there meet at the bottom, or almost meet. Those 2 verts met, so we can just weld them. And these I'm just gonna collapse. So also make sure we have this vert welded. And I will just give it 1 smoothing group here on the whole object. And now that we look at it here from the left side, we can just collapse everything, the symmetry modifier, and delete that piece here because it's only appearing on the right side. And another thing I want to do is go over here to face mode and select these upper segments, and I will then first of all make sure everything is selected that we want, and then detach it and cap the open faces here, or the open spots, because I want that to be a unique element as seen on our reference image. Later, once we have our turbo smooth and chamfer on that, it will actually be more obvious. So for now, I just attach it back together and give it a proper chamfer here on these edges. And let me take these verts here. I'm in the bottom perspective, and now I go over here to the scale and bring them in a bit more. Going to detach these faces as a clone and work on the release button that we have in there. So first of all, I'm just going to collapse these verts. We really only want to have the proper dimension, and for that we can definitely make use of that geometry. Let me align that here horizontally and vertically here. And add another edge loop here. Put it into position and extrude these faces out here. Gonna put it to 0 and just drag it down, the extrusion. Bring it a bit to the right, and now make sure that we have that curve there as well. Let's give it a chamfer here. And let's give it 4 sides here, the chamfer. Confirm that and do the same thing over here. Make it nice and round. And now it's just a matter of cleaning that up here, all this geometry that the chamfer produced that we don't need. Now we have some overlapping geometry there, so we have to make sure we connect some verts to prevent that. Cap that top part so it's filled with geometry. And now we want to also add these bolts there, these bolt heads. And for that I'm gonna just create some fresh bolts. I won't use the screws that we created earlier because these bolt heads look different. Just gonna work with a cylinder as well. Put that into place and scale it up a bit. And then collapse it to an editable poly once we have our parameters correct here. Just select that face, invert the selection and delete everything so that we're just left here with the front cap piece of the cylinder. And now just here with the inset, I will pop that out a bit. And also give it another inset here. Just collapse that inset here in the middle so we only have one vert. And let's make use of that dot loop tool here under our ribbon. So we can select one edge, click that button, it selects every second edge, and then we can also collapse it to minimize our poly count here a bit on that bolt head. However, I'm keeping all the edges on the outer shape of that screw or bolt head because that's where we really want to have that perfectly round object with a lot of verts. And other than that, we have a pretty nice looking bolt head here. Just give it a bit of a scale. Make sure it's aligned properly. And then just copy it over here. Shift and drag. And also copy it over to the other side. And let's add another screw element here. Again, I'm working with a cylinder. Invert and delete. Bring that out here. And drag some fresh geo out. Make a copy here to the other side, rotate it 180 degrees. And there we go. And next I will cut a hole into our pistol stock as seen there on the reference, so that this trigger guard doesn't just magically intersect there. So let's go back here, pistol stock. And first of all, I want to straighten that edge here. Make sure it is perfectly aligned. And the same thing goes for these edges. Gonna align it vertically. And now we can just take these faces or edges and delete them. and drag some fresh geometry out of these here. Let's go over to the isolation mode to see that better. Again, align these edges that we just dragged out, weld them together, and just clean it up a bit here. Target weld these verts back in place. And now I just bring over that edge here, drag some geometry out, put it to 0, and target weld this one over there. And that leaves us with this element there, cut into our pistol stock. And now we just have to go back here to our trigger guard and also give it a bit of a rotation here. I'm gonna right click that rotate button and put it to 2 degree, and now position it here with our receiver. And I will actually take this part here on the top of that trigger guard as well and make sure that it looks like it's actually going in there with a curve as seen on the reference image. Let me go over to left orthographic view. I deleted the top face, so now in edge mode I can just drag some more edges out here and just manually align them so that we have a curve there. Chamfer that, make it a bit rounder. And I also want to bring it up a bit. So now it looks pretty good. And let's work on the trigger. For that, I'm going to create another cylinder. Make sure it has enough sides so it's nice and round. Again, select, invert, and delete, so we're only left with the front face of it. Inset that, and now here with the FDD modifier, we can already push it into place so that we get a bit of that shape there from the trigger. Just gonna delete the faces that we don't want. Bring that down a bit. And let me make a selection here for all these edges on the left side so that we can vertically align it. And that doesn't work because the cylinder had a rotation on it, which we have to reset with reset X form. So collapse reset X form, and now we can actually align it vertically. And continue by getting rid of some of these edges and verts here. Gonna leave it on the right side. Align that here horizontally. And just continue working on that shape here. Let's bring it in a bit. And in border mode, I will just then push out some geometry here, put it to 0. Select the verts on the side and bring it in even further. The trigger is not really that wide. And let's see how it looks with the symmetry on. Gonna collapse it actually. Delete the top faces, and over here in the scale and shift, we can then drag some more geometry out to get that shape that I see on the reference image. Just continue to shape it around a bit. Let's bring it up also. And also let's give it a good chamfer here on the side, at least one segment. Select these edges and chamfer it. And just target weld this here back together. And we don't need that edge loop, so I'm just going to delete it with Control Backspace. Scale that out a bit more. And the whole thing also can use a bit of a scale here on the x-axis. And that looks a little bit too cut off here at the bottom, so we'll just chamfer it along these edges and weld it together. And let's have a look here at the silhouette. It still looks a little bit strange there, the curve. First of all, let me bring that down here a bit more. And now let's make that a bit more round here. And speaking of round, I want to put that vert all the way up there and drag this one out as well here. Just gonna get rid of these edges with backspace and now just reconnect it up to here after we chamfered it a bit more. And just some reconnecting of verts here. Have it around there. And now I will actually take our receiver and cut a hole in there where the trigger is supposed to go in. So let's connect some edges here. And cut that hole in there. So first of all, I'm going to chamfer that edge. Make sure our trigger is in the right position. And now I will just take these faces, give them an inset, convert it to vertex and scale it on the x-axis. Give it another inset, these faces, and just bring it up. That way we can quickly create some geometry here. Let me select these edges here, convert it to vertex, and now with the scale and our edge constraint, widen it up a bit here. Gonna take the whole thing, give it an auto smooth. And as a next thing, we are then going to work here on our safety switch. Give it a cylinder with some good sides to it here. 32 should be fine. And do our usual thing here, apply gray material, select the front face, invert and delete. And now I will make an edge connection here, delete the faces that we don't want, or the face we don't want. Have a quick look here at our reference image. And that reveals that it's going under the receiver there. So first of all, I'm just going to take that edge here and drag some geometry out here all the way on the x-axis. And notice how I have an extra edge here. because now I'm gonna drag some more up here, and that's basically where that safety switch makes that curve under the receiver. Target weld that back into place. And just bring that vertex up all the way here. Bring that down a bit. And let's see what we do next. First of all, let's bring that down here or to the left while being an edge constraint. And next I'm going to take the faces here and give it an inset so that we have basically duplicated geometry but smaller version of it in the inside. Connect some edges here, and while being in edge constraint mode, make sure they are straight. And let's already work here on that little bit. That's actually a cut off element. So I will just connect some verts here with a cut tool and prepare our shape for it. So now I will take these faces here and give them a bevel. The bevel is almost like the extrude, but like the name suggests, has a bevel radius on it or angle. So we don't have like the perfect 90-degree extrusion on it, but actually already a bit of a tapered element. Let's do some more cutting here on that. Just eyeball it. And actually I'm just gonna target weld that stuff here. Already clean up the geometry here a bit. Control backspace on these edges. And that piece also can need another bevel on it. Let's go over here to the right view and give it the proper amount. Gonna get rid of that edge here. And this could be a bit rounder, so I'm just gonna give it a chamfer. Get rid of these verts there. And let me take these faces that we have here, and for the moment I will just delete them. And let me check the vertex here, the X position, 0.27. I'm gonna copy that and paste it onto that face here, so that the position of that face and that vertex there in the back, our geometry in the back, are on the same position. And next, I'm gonna make an edge connection here in the middle. Take these two vertices and give them a chamfer. And now I'm also gonna give that vertex here a chamfer. Already push it a bit to the left and just make it a bit rounder here with even more chamfering. Gonna delete that vertex, and that leaves us with that curve that we can see on the reference. Next, I'll take that edge and bring it a little bit more here to the left, convert it to a vertex selection, and paste also these coordinates there for the x-axis. Gonna chamfer it a bit here on these corners to make it all a little rounder looking. Let's align it a bit more here. And it looks like this is actually going down there a little bit, that element. So let me use the cut tool for that and just take a bit of an element out here. Gonna target weld that down here. And now it's time to use our shell modifier on it with an inner amount of 0.05 centimeters. And make sure you have select inner faces checked there at the bottom, because what we're going to do next is, with that selection here, going to collapse it, detach these inner faces and delete them. Select and delete. And that leaves us here with our safety switch and these edges in the middle, the segment. And now I go over to border mode and just cap it, which leaves us with some nice and cheap geometry. And all that we have to do is connect these words together. The geometry that the shell modifier created there in the back would have been way too expensive and also not clean. And for that kind of geometry that we will barely ever see, it's perfectly fine just to perform that action that we just did here and create some geometry there that is cheap. Just gonna give it a smoothing group here and also here. And now I will create another cylinder and work on that screw element here. The joint of that safety switch. And I'm just gonna delete the back face there and bring these edges closer by each other. And that looks like we can perform another inset on that thing. Let's just position it better. And now I'm just gonna drag that down here with an inset and another one and push it out so that we get that element that we see on the reference image. Just gonna auto smooth it. And let's just take everything and actually push it over here to where it belongs. Since we were mostly working in the isolation mode and I didn't really notice it before. So now it's in place. And I'm still not convinced with that look here, so I will take it and reshape it a bit so that it's looking a little rounder here. And that's pretty much already it. Next, we still have these two elements left. And that's going to be similar like what we did with the trigger guard. We will just extrude some geometry out. I'm gonna put it to 0, the extrusion, and then just drag it out so it's perfectly straight. Also make sure it's aligned here, horizontally aligned, the top faces. And now I'm just going to extrude some more faces out here. Again, I have the extrusion amount to 0 and then just drag it out. Give it a bit of a scale. It actually has a bit of that curve that I want to maintain there. And just continue with some chamfering here. And same as here on that edge. Same here at the bottom. Extrude, confirm, and then just drag it out. I'm gonna use the local mode for that. And let's just delete these faces here and give it the border mode here. Or the bridge mode is what I mean. And cap it here, target weld, and also just clean up that geometry here. And now same as before, extrude and drag it out here on the Z-axis. Align it. This one is actually perfectly straight. So it needs to be perfectly aligned there. And now with these two edges selected, I'm also going to chamfer it. And then just some more cleaning up here. Target weld. And that still looks weird. I'm just gonna get rid of these edges here. And that could be a bit more of a curve there. So we'll give it a chamfer. Target weld that back onto that newly created edge. And we don't need these edges. Control backspace. And just make some connection here. Let me just get out of the isolation mode and back here to our receiver. I'm going to detach the upper faces on it as a clone. Detach as a clone and drag it all the way up here, because as a next thing we are then going to work on our upper receiver. Bring that down here, drag some geometry out and put it into place. Don't need these edges. Add another edge loop here and already prepare this geometry by putting these edges where they make sense. Just scale it all up a bit here, or not up, just on the x-axis, make it a little wider. And now I'm going to take these two faces, switch over to vertex, convert to vertex selection, and bring it in here with the X scale. Take these vertices, and do the same thing. And now I'm going to give it a chamfer here. And another one. And that edge in the middle, I will bring it up a bit so that we have a nice curve there. Just gonna delete these faces on the left and on the right side. These caps, we're gonna add them back later. For now, I'm just concerned here about that actual shape, and that requires some more chamfering here. Another edge loop here. And as a next thing, I want to work on that shape. But first of all, I go over here to the back or the front perspective and reshape that a bit, as seen there on the reference image. Bring that in here with the FDD modifier and collapse it. Add an edge loop and bring it into the right position here. I'm gonna select these faces and use our FDD modifier on it. Collapse. And give it another chamfer here. Going to bridge that geometry and just cap it here. And just give everything an inset and push it out a bit. Make a ring selection and give it a flow connect there. And that created some faces down here that we don't want, so I will just delete them, straighten them, copy these Z coordinates and paste them onto these two verts. So now we have it all on the same level here. And now it's just a matter of connecting these vertices here, which is easier here in the left orthographic view. Switch over, select them, and connect with a connect shortcut. Ring selection and add another edge loop. And let's switch over to the edge mode, select these edges, connection there. And let's already work here on that grip element or the knob or whatever it's called. Add some more edges here, bring them into place. Actually, let's take these edges here and bring them up a bit more. Back to that vertex selection here, I'm just gonna scale it on the x-axis and give it a chamfer here. These ones I'm also gonna bring more in. And that leaves us with that round shape there for that element. Target weld that here. And now I'm just taking that, give it an inset and push it out. Grow the selection and give it an auto smooth. And let me delete that here on that side and use the symmetry modifier. And I will just take that after I collapse the symmetry modifier and drag it all the way here to the left, that element. Now I'm going to just detach that here so that we can work individually on each side. Going to make an edge connection here, align it vertically and bring it over here to that side. And I'm going to use the FDD modifier to push them here into that position that aligns with our safety switch, if you look at the reference image. Add another edge connection here. Bring it into the right position. And add another edge connection here. Bring it down a bit. And let me use the FDD modifier here to also get that curve going that we see on the reference. Collapse it and just individually drag it out a bit more here. And now I'm just going to take these faces here and delete them. Chamfer it a bit more. And also down here. Reconnect these two verts and just get rid of these edges with backspace. Chamfer it even more here, make it nice and round. Same as here. And also here I want to be doing the same thing. Another edge connection here so we can get that curve better. Sometimes an edge connection just helps us to add an extra vertex. Then we can just get rid of the edge itself with backspace and delete whatever vertex we don't need. And next I want to pop that out there a bit more on the receiver. So I will go over here to our slice plane and align it into the proper position. And then just perform that slice here on it and do another one here. And now I am left here with a lot of edges that I actually don't want to have, so I'm just gonna clean that up a bit. By doing some target welding. Let's bring that up to here. And now I'm going to take these faces here, go over here to our move tool and just push it out on the x-axis. Let me select these faces and give them one smoothing group. And that's already good enough. We may have to do some more work on that later. For now, it's fine. And next I'm gonna take these faces here, press Shift and drag them out on the x-axis, which makes a copy of it. And I will then create that floater that we see there on the reference image. Bring that here into position. It's hovering in front of our geometry, that floater, as all floaters should. Gonna inset that here. Push it in and make sure that it's really aligned here to our receiver. And I actually don't want that to be beveled there at the bottom as well. So I'm gonna connect these verts. Target weld it here. And before I do it here, I'm just gonna have another edge connection here through it. Go over to edge mode and drag it to the right side. And now I'm going to target weld it down here, which pretty much gives us this nice shape that we see there on the reference image. So that will serve as our floater, and I'm gonna copy it over here to the other side. Mirror it on the x-axis. And then just go over here to the top or the front verts and drag it out more so that we get that shape there. But we're not quite done yet because that shape makes a bit of a curve. So we'll just drag these edges up here. Straighten them on the top. And chamfer it here. And that's pretty much it. Just double check that. And also drag these inner edges here all the way to the receiver. And that's pretty good looking there for the floaters. Next, I'm gonna do some work here on that side of the receiver since we're already looking at it. So again, I'm gonna use the cut tool here and get some edges in place where we then later just delete the faces that we don't want. But first of all, let's work on that curve here. Time to delete these faces and do some more chamfering on the corners. Reconnect these two verts and delete the edges that we don't want to have. Also make it round here. And the next thing that I want to do is attach these two parts back together. And since we have some of these edges here, we can't properly weld it. So what I will do is just select all these edges that we want to get rid of. Make sure we don't delete any edges that we actually need. And after we got rid of these, we will then switch over to the vertex mode, select everything and weld it with a minimal threshold of 0.01. And as a next thing, I want to be adding these pieces here on the top part. And for that, we're gonna make use of some more slicing. Go over here to the left orthographic view, put it into X-ray mode, and just perform some slicing here on these elements. Right in the middle. And as the next thing, I'm just going to select these edges that we were just slicing through here and deselect the parts that we don't want to chamfer. Because as the next thing, we are going to chamfer it out so that we have these popping elements actually as a double edge. But first of all, let me just go over here and deselect what we don't want. And now with that selection active here, we can go over and chamfer it. And now I'm going to make a new selection here. Select these particular edges, not on these two here on the right side, just for the ones we selected. Switch over here to our local mode and scale them all on the x-axis. And now I'm going to chamfer them so that we also have them round there where we actually want them to be round. Gonna get rid here of these edges with backspace and delete the vertexes. And do some connections over here. Just a matter of cleaning it up here properly now. Since we can't work with a symmetry modifier on the receiver, we just have to go through it manually here for every piece. On both sides. And same over here. Backspace and delete that vertex and that one. And now it's time to select only these faces here that we were chamfering, these inner faces, and I'm going to bevel it. Give it the proper bevel amount here, matching our reference images. And I'm going to make a ring selection here on all these and give it a flow connect to pop it out even more. Just gonna connect these vertices here as well. And now I'm going to grow that selection here back in face mode and apply one smoothing group. And also what I want to do is take these edges here in the ring selection, just the upper ones, and make it a bit rounder with a flow connect as well. Suits it better there for the receiver, the upper receiver. And we are still not done with these sticking out elements. Still have to do the ones that face in the other direction, towards the front side. So I'm gonna make some edge connections here on the upper 6 edges. Edge connection and chamfer it out so that we have it exactly in place where we want it to be. And also over here we got one. And now I'm going to take the two faces each here for each segment. And back here to our toolbar, I'm going to click on Hide Unselected with that face selection active. And I'm going to select only the corners and give them a chamfer. And then I will jump out of this hide mode by clicking on Unhide All, just above Hide Unselected. I actually have a shortcut for it as well, for the case you didn't see me doing that. And now I'm going to take that edge here, each, convert it to vertex and give it a bit of a scale so that we get that nice and round shape there. Vertex mode and scale on the y-axis and also over here. And now I'm just going to reconnect some of that geometry here that now looks a little strange and clean it up. Backspace and delete those vertices that we don't want to have. And just some more manual cleanup here. Same for all these segments. That upper receiver is a very unique piece, so it requires a lot of handwork and we have to do a lot of manual work here without copying and symmetry action, so it just takes a bit of extra steps here. And again, backspace and delete the verts. And we are almost there. Only that piece left here. Connect and delete some edges. As well as the verts that we don't want. And now we can take that face selection here and give it a bevel, just like we did it for the other part or other parts. Gonna give it a second bevel to make it a bit more curved. And I want to take these edges here, edge loop, and convert it to a face selection so that we have one smoothing group for these two segments there. And now I'm just going to get rid of these edges here as well that we don't need. And I hope I didn't forget to mention it any earlier, but if you double click an edge, it will automatically make an edge loop as well. So I have both a shortcut for it as well as often I just double click an edge. Very useful. And now we are getting there with that receiver. Only one important step left. We have to fill the inner part of the receiver with some geometry. And we're gonna perform the same action that we did on our safety switch. First of all, backface cull, shell modifier, and give it the proper depth here. 0.0, it's actually not too thick, so 0.05 should be fine. Select inner faces, collapse, take these faces and detach them. And now what I'm going to do here with that is not immediately delete it, but I'm going to delete most parts of it. However, I'm going to leave that part there in the back. Let's make sure I got all these other faces selected. Now I'm just going to delete that. And now we are left here with that little piece in the back, which I want to attach to it and also weld it together. And now we can take these edges here in border mode and cap it. And now I will go over into the front perspective and connect these vertices. And again, that gives us cheap geometry there on the inside. Very convenient and easy to create. And leaves us with a proper upper receiver part here. And this one's a bit pushed out, so let me find the right vertex here to make that connection. And overall that looks pretty good already, so just some more connections here. It doesn't have to be like 100% what I'm doing right now. As long as you just make sure nothing is clipping, we are pretty much good to go there with the inner part of the receiver. And other than that, that's pretty much it here for it. Just gonna take these faces that we created in the inside, one by one. And I also want to then assign a smoothing group to it. So let's give it the auto smooth. And there we go.